Today we're going to be talking about server distributions. Unlike desktop distributions, these actually matter. They matter depending on your use case. So we've got a few use cases we're going to talk about today. Step 1 is stability. You're running mission critical applications for your boss. You don't want to get called out at 3 AM because of broken packages or that something's broken, right? What distros do I recommend for you? I recommend Debian because it's very stable and the packages are extremely out of date. They're not out of date, they're stable, and they only get security patches, so you'll never get updates. Out of date was the wrong term to use. I apologize. Also, we've got Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So you actually have to pay for this one, so you have to fork out some dosh, but it comes with support. And to be honest, if something goes wrong, you just phone Red Hat and say, "Hello, I've got a problem," and they say, "We've got an answer." So if you've been hired and you've lied on your CV, buy Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That leads into our next distribution choices, which are Elmer Linux and Rocky Linux. These are distributions that are a fork of the current Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So because of the GPL, Red Hat Linux is free software, just with a proprietary layer built on top, all the logos and branding, that's all proprietary. So they strip that, or you can strip those from Red Hat, and then that is what Rocky and Elmer Linux was. Now CentOS used to be this, but it's no longer anymore. So Rocky and Elmer will have the same stability as Red Hat does, just without the support. So these are what I use on my personal servers. The packages aren't up to date. If you basically don't want to do any patching or admin besides security patches, and you know that when you update things won't break because of new versions, these are the servers that I'd pick for yourself. Next category is I want stability, but I also want relatively up-to-date packages. So I would recommend you the new CentOS, which is called CentOS Stream. This distribution is weird. It's like the midpoint between Red Hat and Fedora. I've never actually used it myself, but it's basically like a beta testing for Red Hat. I wouldn't really touch it. I used to love CentOS, mate. It was amazing until IBM bought Red Hat, and then that all went down the drain. Right. Ubuntu I'd also recommend. The latest Ubuntu server. It's pretty nice. It's just Ubuntu. It works. Pretty standard stuff there. It's also very easy, and what's important for a server is a lot of applications will have install guides for Ubuntu, but nothing else. Like, you might be lucky and get Red Hat / CentOS install instructions, but if you don't, you'll always have Ubuntu ones. So that's one thing to think about as well. And also I would recommend OpenSUSE Leap, or OpenSUSE. Again, it gets regular updates, but it's not quite a rolling release, so it's pretty stable there. The next category is I want my packages updated quite often as I'm running relatively bleeding edge applications that require the latest dependencies. So we're not quite on the bleeding edge here, so we're not quite on the rolling release, but we are close to it. So for these, I would actually recommend Fedora Server. Yes, you heard me right. I'm recommending Fedora as a server. So there's already a Fedora Server distribution that you should use. You shouldn't use the Fedora Desktop distribution. You should actually use the one that's specifically meant for servers. And it is surprisingly good, actually. I've used it for a few things. And if I was sort of making a hobbyist server and not a server for a job, I would put Fedora Server on it. The reason being is that it gets a massive update every 6 months, and you never have to reinstall the whole thing. It just every 6 months, chunk, big load of changes. So from Fedora 36 to Fedora 37, let's say you will have package updates in that time, but you don't actually necessarily need to update them. So you do one big version upgrade every 6 months and you're golden. Bob is your uncle, as they say. That's what I'd recommend for a good midway point. Just Fedora Server. I really like it. I think it's quite underrated in the server department. Maybe because it's like, you can even do what I do, which is I stay a release back. So if the latest version of Fedora is on 37, that's when I update to 36. So I was on 35. So then I'm on 36. When 37 becomes 38, I go to 37. So that way, all the bugs get ironed out at 37, and you're just on 36, you're golden. Because if you update straight away, there can be some issues that haven't been beta tested, or issues with software that you're using, what have you. It's really good for me because I do a lot of Python development, and Python moves quite quickly. It gets regular updates, and Fedora always has the latest Python, so it's brilliant. It's chef's kiss. The Arch Linux category.
I'd actually recommend Arch Linux for a server if you're in this category. Why?
Why would you want Arch Linux on a server? Because you want extremely bleeding edge packages, and maybe you kind of want a streamed down system to run really quick. I mean, also in the Arch Linux category, there is OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. Now this is their bleeding edge distribution. This is like Arch Linux, but you're slightly more stable, and you get all the OpenSUSE enterprisey features. They have like their own GUI package manager, which is kind of like iffy, I think, but it's useful if you're maybe not giga technical. You can do everything through it's like a TUI actually, YAST it's called, and you can do everything through that. Like, oh nice, oh I can do a GUI, I'm cool. You also might want to pick OpenSUSE Tumbleweed here if you want to use the RPM package format. So a lot of packages are distributed as RPMs, not whatever Arch Linux uses. So normally you've got like .debs for Debian and .rpms for CentOS, Red Hat. OpenSUSE uses RPMs as Fedora. If you still want a rolling release, but you want maybe better support, it might be worth picking Tumbleweed here. But you're up to you. If you're going to pick Arch, honestly, if you're in this category, you're going to pick Arch Linux, so I didn't even know why I'm talking about it. Right, I'm new to all this category. Use Ubuntu Server, like I mentioned before, it's got all the big install guides. I'd actually recommend Ubuntu Server here. Next category, I'm using containers. So, inside your container, I would recommend you use Alpine because it's very minimal. It's extremely minimal. It doesn't even have the GNU core utils. I think it uses BusyBox or their own version of it, which are like stripped down versions of the core utils. So you might want to use that inside your containers. That's because you build your container image with just your dependencies in. So it's so streamlined and so quick. In what distribution you want to put your containers on, it doesn't really matter. It might be worth for you picking Core OS, which is like a OS designed for container usage. So maybe that suits your fancy there. Actually, that's part of the Fedora project as well, so I really like it. Last but not least, we've got the I'm a psychopath or stupidly smart category. Gentoo. That's right, I'm actually going to recommend Gentoo. Whoa, he's recommending Gentoo for a server? Is he insane? No, the stock market famously uses Gentoo because it is extremely stripped down. You know, they need to be trading like 1 microsecond might make you miss the trade, or you buy it when it's stupidly high instead of like, you know, it's got low and everyone saw the stock was low and they was like, oh, buy the stock, it's really low. And you go to buy the stock, but by the time you click buy and your kernel's done all the thing and like your TCP network and stack has done all the stuff, it's like, oh, it's jumped up 10% and that's huge because you placed a massive buy order, and then it's like, oh no, it failed. That's why you really want massively stripped down Gentoo is really, really useful in extreme edge cases. Either that or you're just stupidly smart or a psychopath and you just want to run Gentoo for the hell of it. You know, if you're really experienced in Gentoo, why not, right? Could be as stable as you want it to be, I guess. Honorable mentions, I'm going to say NixOS here. I've never actually used it myself, but it is very interesting. So it's like declarative package management. So, you know, when you do a package update, that package update is registered, and basically I think you put it in like a config file and you can roll back and keep it in source code. So it's like a very programmable and modular OS. I'm not too familiar, but I want to look into it. And I'd also recommend the BSD. Specifically, I quite like OpenBSD because if I'm ever going to use BSD, I'm going to basically have it as like a bastion, you know, a jump host. Like any server facing the internet that is not a web server, so like a VPN hosting or whatever, any server that I really want secure, I'd put a OpenBSD. It's very stripped down and very secure, but I'm not using it myself at the moment. And also, yeah, FreeBSD if you want as well. That's fine too, but I prefer OpenBSD for reasons that I'm not going to explain because I just like the logo better. I think the is better than the that's literally why. Just hope you learned something. Let me know what distribution you use on your server. Is it any that I mentioned? Are you insane in using Kali Linux on servers because you think you're elite hacksaw, but you're actually getting hacked yourself because Kali Linux is insecure? Tell me. Bye.